It never flew here at Fort Sumter. It had a red stripe on the very end of it, so it was not completely white anymore. Now that very last flag on your right is the 35-star American flag. This was the last flag that flew here during the Civil War by the Union troops. However, some of you may know that there was 36 states at the end of the American Civil War. And that's because states do not get added to the flag, or stars don't get added to the flag until July 4th. Nevada was that 36th state, and it just missed the cutoff. So it was not added to the flag. And the one flying in the middle is our national flag today. So now that we have everyone in here, if you all want to follow me to listen to my official historic talk, you can follow me over. Because this place where you're at today has a lot of history. Not only was it where the American Civil War started, but it was used up until the end of the Second World War to protect Charleston Harbor. Because America knew whoever controlled Charleston Harbor controlled Charleston. With Charleston being the largest port in the South, it was very important to contain control of it. And there was German U-boats, German mines right outside the harbor during World War II. And Fort Sumter was here as a symbol of power to protect Charleston Harbor. But most people know Fort Sumter as the start of the Civil War. It was the physical start of the war. And I say physical because those problems and those issues that ended up leading to the Civil War had been going on since the beginning of our country. Our forefathers did not know how to deal with those social, economic, and political issues over the institution of slavery. So they decided to push it off. Let future generations deal with it. Maybe they'll have a better way to fix the problem. However, over those future generations, those problems and those issues and the arguments between the free and the slave states only got worse until something happened in November of 1860 that really started everything off, that led up to what happened here. Who could tell me what happened in November of 1860? Looks like we have, yes.
President Lincoln was elected.
Exactly. Abraham Lincoln was elected to be the president of the United States. Now the southern slaveholding states were really worried about this. It wasn't necessarily because he was anti-slavery. However, he was anti-expansion. So what that meant was that there would be no more slave states admitted into the Union. Now up until this point, they had a balanced number of slave and free states. If a free state was added, a slave state had to be added. It kept that status quo for all these years. However, if there was going to be no more slave states added and only free states, that delicate balance was going to be greatly shifted, and it wouldn't be in favor of slavery. Now, the southern states were so worried about this that he did not receive a single electoral vote from the southern states. Not only did he not get a single electoral vote, but they didn't even, most of them didn't even put him on the ballot. That's how nervous they were. So for the next month and a half after Abraham Lincoln was elected, there was people in Washington from South Carolina trying to make some compromise, trying to figure out some way that this anti-expansion plan wouldn't happen. Fortunately, neither side wanted to compromise, and after South Carolina got a new governor, his name was Francis Pickens, things started happening. He was a take-action kind of guy. 4 days after he took office, South Carolina officially seceded from the United States of America, being the first of the 7 states to make up the Confederate States of America before the start of the Civil War, and the first of the 11 that made up the entire Confederate States of America. Now all this time during this happened, Major Robert Anderson was only about a mile away from here over at Fort Moultrie, and he was well aware of what was going on. Charleston was very much the epicenter of the secession movement, so he was becoming very nervous for him and his men's safety. So on December 26th, under the cover of darkness, him and his men came over in just a few rowboats to occupy Fort Sumter. Now the next morning, whenever he raised his huge 36 by 20 foot garrison flag, that was the one that's hanging up on the wall in the museum at Liberty Square, all of Charleston could see it. And the Charlestonians were outraged. Some of them wanted to start war right then and there. However, war was not the first option. So they tried to talk it out. Each side was trying to make a way, trying to compromise, so war would not start. However, the compromises kept failing. Neither neither side wanted to give anything up. Now, during these next 4 months, while the North and the South were communicating, Major Robertson and his men were here, and they were running dangerously low on supplies. They really only had what they brought over with them in just those few rowboats in the end of December. Sure, they were getting some fresh food and their information from Charleston until about mid-March, but once they were cut off completely by the Confederate forces, they were getting really into dire need of food and supplies. So Abraham Lincoln decided to send a supply ship down to Fort Sumter to reinforce them with men and also give them more food and supplies. But on good faith, he told Francis Pickens that he was sending the supply ship down, hoping that it would arrive here peacefully without any shots fired. However, Francis Pickens said, no, that's enough. We're trying to get the Union troops out of Charleston Harbor. We don't want them to resupply and stay here longer. By this point, they had already reclaimed all the federal fortifications around Charleston Harbor. So the only stronghold left for the Union troops was here at Fort Sumter. So on April 12th, the commander of the Confederate troops here in Charleston, P.G.T. Beauregard, sent over a few of his men under a flag of truce to give Anderson his final ultimatum. He said, you have 1 hour to evacuate this fort or we're going to commence fire. Now Anderson tried to reason with them and said, we're going to be starved out by April 15th anyways, so just let us leave peacefully when that happens. Because Anderson didn't know that Lincoln's supply ship was just outside the harbor a few miles away. So they denied his compromise and they said, no, the ultimatum is standing still. 1 hour. This is at 3 o'clock in the morning. So by 4 o'clock, there was no sign that Anderson and his men were evacuating the fort. But however, Beauregard gave him an extra half an hour. I mean, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. Not many people are up and ready to leave at 3 o'clock in the morning. So by 4:30, there was still no sign of the evacuation of Union troops. So Beauregard signaled to one of his men over at Fort Johnson to shoot a single mortar shot that exploded over Charleston Harbor, signaling to the other men that it was time to commence firing. So at 4:30 in the morning, this first shot of the American Civil War was fired. However, the Union did not respond right away. Not only did Anderson want to avoid war, because he's already been in 3 wars. He didn't want to be in another one. He didn't want to start another one. So he held his fire until dawn. Then he told one of his officers, Abner Doubleday, to shoot a shot over at Morris Island to officially start the American Civil War. For 34 hours, Anderson and his 85 men dug in and shot off the few cannons that they could actually man. And actually, out of that 85 men, 10 of them were his band. So they weren't going to do much good firing cannons. And against the 3,700 Confederate troops, they were having quite a difficult time. However, any of the shots that the Confederates shot over didn't do too much damage to the structure of the fort. The walls are 5 to 7 feet thick, and any cannonball that would hit it wouldn't do too much damage. So the Confederates realized this, and so they decided to change their tactics. They started shooting things called hot shots. Now, hot shots are cannonballs that they heat up in a furnace until they're red hot, and shoot them meaning to catch things on fire. Well, that's exactly what happened. One of those hot shots landed in the officers' quarters and immediately set them ablaze. Now, Anderson had to decide, was he going to fight the Confederate troops or was he going to fight the fire? Well, the biggest problem with the officers' quarters catching on fire is that the main powder magazine was located underneath those officers' quarters. When they built Fort Sumter, that back wall was supposed to be the safest wall. However, when they're being fired on from all sides, not quite. So Anderson decided that he was going to fight the fire. And so officially on April 14th, 1861, he surrendered to the Confederate troops and saved him and his men's life. However, that surrender was on very gentlemanlike terms. There was no prisoners of war taken. Anderson was allowed to lead his men and his things off of the island, and most importantly, he was allowed to lower his garrison flag to a 100-cannon salute. Now, up until this point, there had not been a single death. 34 hours, 3,000 shells shot back and forth, and not a single person died. However, on that 47th shot of the 100 cannon salute. Private Daniel Howe was killed instantly by a cannon that backfired. He became the first of the 53 men who lost their lives here at Fort Sumter, protecting and defending this fort. He became the first of the 620,000 men, women, and children who lost their lives during the 4-year war to keep this country together. And all of that changed American history forever, started right here where you're at today. So I hope y'all enjoy your visit. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, Jim, or Jill. And I want to thank you very much.